The Bible says in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God. And in John 1:14, it says that the Word that was God became flesh and walked among us. That eternal Word, the eternal Word of God became flesh and walked among us.
Christ is King! Christ is King! Christ is King!
Let all that you do be done in love. A Christian, when they see their society collapsing around them, doesn't cower or run in fear. He doesn't stick his head in the sand and hope that it will all change and just go away and be all right. He doesn't throw up his hands and say all is lost. A true man, when he sees a challenge, he rises to the challenge. He digs deep within his own soul to find the strength to do what is necessary to meet the challenge in front of him. And this is what as Christians we are called to do. That means that when we see our society collapsing around us, we don't run away. We don't go and join the opposition as Andrew Tate did. We don't despair. No, as Christians, we stand up for that which is good and true and noble. The tutelage of our Lord Jesus Christ calls us to bear our cross and to suffer in his way.
Tick-tock, time to rock. Good evening. Good morning, good afternoon to everyone who's watching from all over the world. It's your friendly neighborhood philosopher here, D. Wood. With me now, we've got Bob, the legend of Speaker's Corner. How you doing, Bob?
I'm well, thanks, David. It's good to see it. It's really different hearing you say that in person than just hearing a recording of you saying it.
Yeah, guys, AP is supposed to be with us. He had a power outage at his house. We decided to go ahead and start. We don't know. Yeah, we don't know if that's going to end in 5 minutes or if it's going to be for hours or something like that. So we said we're going to go ahead and start. And then
sounds to me like the pet at my homework excuse.
Yep.
What's a bit of electricity between friends, Ridvan? Stop running.
AP was scared. He was scared. He was scared.
Be on the same live stream as me.
He was
I've
scared.
been trying to get him on the live stream for ages.
Yeah, and then he's going to be all ashamed and embarrassed that he's not been on with you.
Yeah. Indeed. So, if he does come, we'll ask him why he didn't attend the NAPC conference.
Because he's running. He's been humiliated. Oh no. We actually know that they scheduled his baptism and he went baptism first.
Aha.
But then they didn't baptize him.
Where's the photo proof? Again, sounds like the dog ate my homework excuse.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. It's kind of funny. So there was the conference, and he had agreed to do the conference, and then his church said, "Hey, since you've already done all your cat-human readings and so on, then we're just going to go ahead and fast track you because you've already learned everything, and so we're going to fast track you and do your baptism. And here's the date of our baptisms." And it was the same date as the conference. And so he's like, well, I got to do that.
Which is fair.
And then, so I went up there because I was going to record his baptism. And then the archbishop or whatever was like, you can't fast track someone. Then everyone's going to want to be fast tracked. So tell him he's got to wait a year like everyone else. And so
also fair.
So yeah.
Personally, again, I still think he's because he appeared on my live stream once, and then I was meant to appear on his live stream as a follow-up. This is when he was still an atheist. And I think he was so devastated by the mathematical linguistic argument that I used. He was so shook by that he never had me on his channel when he was an atheist. And then I invite him to the conference after he becomes a Christian. Again, he knows I'm going to be there. He comes with a reason not to be there. Here I am meant to be doing a live stream with both you and him. And now all of a sudden the electricity's gone out and he can't come. I'm starting to see a pattern.
The
I don't know about
electricity
you.
went out.
Yeah, I'm
that
starting
is
to
a
see a
pattern.
pattern.
That is a pattern. Everything that's connected to you, he suddenly disappears.
Can't make it. I think he's still recovering. You know. Anyway. Do you want to introduce today, or shall I?
Yeah. So I'll just kind of give the very, very general topic, and then you can get it. You could be a little more clear. I did want to just point out here we've got all these messages saying Jai and DOC sent us. I guess Jai and DOC were just finishing their live stream and said everyone go over to ours, because there's a bunch of messages here from people over on Jai and DOC's channel. So that's cool.
Well
That's
done,
cool.
Jai and DOC.
Yeah, so I put the topic as transforming the church to defeat jihad, because kind of looks like, well, it's a weird situation. For 14 centuries, Christians in Europe understood whatever else we disagree about, whatever else we fight about, whatever else happens, we all understand that we are not going to be controlled by that, right? And everyone kind of, yeah, we're all on the same page. Whatever else happens, we're not going to be controlled by that, because you don't come back from that. And so everyone was on the same page. And then just over the past several decades, Europe changed, and we can't invite it in fast enough. Like, we want more of this stuff, And the church over the past several decades has seemed woefully ill-equipped to deal with anything having to do with Islam. It's like very frequently doing the opposite of what would actually be effective in dealing with Islam. And you've got some thoughts along those lines, so why don't you go ahead and expand however you want on that sort of issue. But it is kind of one of the main issues confronting Christians right now. You still have the spread of Islam due to high birth rates and so on, and got to do something at some point, or everything will just be eaten up by Islam.
Yeah, and I think that I should start off just by saying what my purpose is on trying to push this is I'm trying to get a conversation started within the church, the kind of conversation that we need to have, but that is not getting aired in our congregations. It's not getting talked about in church meetings, and it ends up being left to a niche group of people like you and me and others like us to try and tackle it. And unfortunately, that just isn't enough. This needs to be a full church response to Islamization. And so what I propose I do is I'll make some points. I'll make a point. I'll let you respond to that point. And then when you finish responding to that point in however you wish, I'll make another point. We'll just go backwards and forwards like that until either we run out of time or interest, or, our electricity cuts out, like apostate prophets in electricity cut out.
Mm-hmm.
You happy with that?
Yeah. And let me just point out that I'm assuming we're going to have differences for a couple different reasons. One, we're different individuals. We're different individuals with different views and so on, different backgrounds, but also, like, the church where I'm at is in a significantly different position from the church where you're at. And like Great Britain, as far as Great Britain's dealings with Islam, is in a seriously different position than the United States. The United States is under no threat, not even long-term threat, of being subjugated by Islam. Islam's just not growing. It hovers right around 1%, because as many people as convert to Islam, about roughly the same number are leaving Islam in any given year, and so on. So Islam's just not growing in the United States. It's not expanding. We still have concerns about people in local areas trying to make a Sharia compliant area or something like that. So we have issues in certain spots like Dearborn, Michigan, and like just recently they were trying to build a epic city where an entire city was going to be run by Islam and so on. That didn't even work out. They couldn't even get that and so on. So you've got that sort of situation. Whereas in the UK, the percentage of Muslims is still pretty low, but that's like if you factor everyone in. In certain places, you guys are just being overwhelmed, and people are seeing the impact of Islam. But anyway, Europe is in a Europe is in a massively different situation that Americans really don't understand. We're not in a position where, hey, we're a couple decades away from Islam taking over like this city, like just dominating this city and so on. Whereas in Europe, there are places that are like that. It's like it's on the horizon. It seems right around the corner and so on. And you guys have seen, even in places where you don't need 50% of the Muslim population or something like that. You have 20 or 30%, and they will already have control over the area and so on. So anyway, the point is, guessing we're going to have different perspectives just based on the sort of the level of desperation of the local area and so on. But anyway, yep, the floor is yours, sir. The floor is yours.
Right. So, and like to go into it, I think that I just want to reference, if anybody wants to know the sheer scale of Islamization in the UK, then they just need to look at Tim Dieppe's work from Christian Concern. And whilst I'm glad that America is not having the problems with Islam that we in Europe are having, I wouldn't rest on your laurels, because if it can happen here, it can also happen there. As I say, that my purpose in bringing this up is to try and talk about, is to try and get a conversation started that needs to be had in our churches that isn't being discussed. And I want to openly encourage everybody who watches this to start talking about it in their churches, in their congregations, in their denominational meetings, and so on. And what I'm going to give is a kind of summary point by point of the kind of worldview that I describe as muscular Christianity, which is a nice little catchphrase I came up with some years ago, to try and express how I wasn't a civic Christian or a Christian, a club kind of Christian. And I can explain what I mean by that if you need me to. But the first point that I make, that I would make, is that as Christians, we need to consciously, openly reject liberal secular humanism. Liberal secular humanism has been the guiding light of the Western world since the Enlightenment. It has come to define every aspect of our lives, and it offers both an alternative identity as well as an alternative focus and loci of activism or raison d'etre. And so the first thing that we as Christians must do is reject liberal secular humanism. So what I mean by that is the idea of the nation state as forming to our identity. So rather than saying that I'm British, I identify with the church rather than with the United Kingdom. In terms of my history, in terms of my culture, in terms of my values, in terms of my doctrine, in terms of my outlook and my aspirations, that every part of my life is defined by what I find in the apostolic tradition, rather than creating some kind of synergy or synthesis between national identity and Christian identity. So it's kind of a rejection of classical liberalism. It's also a rejection of the idea of a secular state, the idea that the state shouldn't be religious or have a religious identity, which is at the very core of liberalism. We've seen in France, which is the liberal secular society par excellence, the way that Islam is just rampantly running away in France. Across Western Europe, they all assume a liberal secular stance, including in the United Kingdom, though on paper that's not the case. And the result of that is that Islam and Islamification is occurring. And whilst in America, for the moment, it's not occurring, you can already see that the attempts have already started in the US. And the US Constitution is very much well set to allow that Islamization to occur. Thanks be to God, I think there's enough Christians in the system to keep frustrating it for now, and the Christian churches are very strong there. But the state itself, if you had allowed Kamala Harris to win, and under your previous president, the figurehead Biden, and the institutions of the state could have quite easily facilitated the growth of Islamification. And finally, on this point, it's also the rejection of humanism, which is this idea that the thing that makes us who we are is some common human derivative, and that our sense of moral and ethics should be based upon the touchstone of a common humanity, rather than the ethical virtue system that is taught in the Christian faith and framed by the Christian faith. And that our allegiance is first and foremost to the church rather than to any other group, whether that group be national or otherwise. So that would be my first point to chuck out there. Feel free to say whatever you like in response.
Yeah, so a couple of thoughts. Me and AP were just talking the other day, and we were talking about I don't know. You have all these things that spring up in society, and then they'll start attacking Christianity and so on. And I'm always thinking the only reason you're able to attack Christianity is you still have a roughly Christian framework that sort of boosts you up to be able to do this. And several people have made a kind of similar point or a similar thought here in different contexts. Like I think it was C.S. Lewis who talked about, sitting on a branch and you're sawing off the branch that you're sitting on. As far as some people doing that, like it's like Christianity is what's holding you up, and you're sitting here sawing off the branch that you're talking about, that you're sitting on. Van Til said he got the point. Cornelius Van Til, he said he understood it when he said he was on a train, and it was there was a toddler standing on his grandfather's lap, and he slapped his grandfather in the face. And Van Til thought that's like atheist with God. He's like, you're only able to slap your grandfather in the face because you're standing on his lap. If you weren't, you wouldn't be able to even reach his face. You're standing on his lap. That's how you're able to slap him in the face. And so it's only your grandfather is the one who's giving you the ability to do this. So he's talking about there. He's drawing the point of like, you're only able to even attack God as an atheist because God is propping you up and giving you that ability in certain ways. He's upholding and sustaining you. He's the one who's giving you the ability to do these very things and so on. But I think you have a similar relationship with Christianity and society. And so I was thinking of it like a trellis, in that grapevines can grow on the ground. They do not grow well on the ground. They do not produce much fruit on the ground. So what you do is you make a trellis, you make this lattice work, and then the vines grow there, and all of a sudden you get more fruit. More can grow on a trellis than on the ground. And so for me, like in society, Christianity is like that. Is like the trellis. It provides this big framework for things to grow on. But guess what? Even anti-Christian ideas can grow on that trellis because it basically provides a level of freedom and respect for rights and respect for people's speech and so on that you can start blasting away with all sorts of even anti-Christian ideas. And Christianity is actually holding you up in society for you to even be able to do this. And then you'll get these guys that are attacking Christianity. And if you get enough things growing on this trellis of Christianity that are anti-Christian, then what are they doing? They're attacking the trellis that they're all growing on. Like you take something, like feminism or something like that, right? You can have some good ideas in feminism as far as like women's rights and so on, but then you start getting all these like weird ideas that ultimately start wreaking havoc on society and lowering the birth rate and so on. And it's just, it's ultimately not going to, let me put it this way. Take an idea like...
Just let me turn my power on. 1 second.
Okay.
Go on.
Yeah. So, you take something like feminism, which as far as, women having rights and so on, that's all awesome stuff. But it starts going in the direction of, basically like destroying the traditional view of the family and so on, which is kind of like one of the pillars of a well-functioning society and so on. And it basically starts destroying things that would even be necessary to have feminism, right? In other words, feminism only works because it has a kind of society that props up people's ability to promote something like feminism. In other societies, you wouldn't even be able to promote the idea because you'd be too busy doing other things, or too busy trying to survive, or something like this. Or people would just like in the Muslim world, they just crush you for even saying it, and they'd toss you in prison or something like that, or kill you
like
in the street.
like in Afghanistan.
Yeah. So anyway, so that you take an idea like feminism, it's kind of, once it kind of crosses a line and goes from, hey, here's some actual good ideas that would, are for the benefit of women, to it is becoming like a destructive towards like the family and so on, in which case it's ultimately long-term going to hurt society. What actually happens with certain ideas, and I'm just using feminism as an example, there are like tons of them and so on. But you take this idea, it runs wild. It ends up doing things like lowering birth rates and things like that. And then you have birth rates being lowered in society. Your government is not going to allow the numbers to start dropping. What are they going to do? They're going to import something from another part of the world. In other words, if the number of workers who are entering the workforce is not going to be at least the replacement level. In other words, for 2 people who die, 2 people are coming in. If all of a sudden for 2 people who die, there's 1 person coming in on average, then your government is going to bring in people from other parts of the world. And guess what? They're not going to be feminists. And so you're a feminist, you're not having kids, and your government is bringing in people who will not support feminism. And what happens? You're eventually going to be outnumbered, and they're going to be the kinds who crush you. They're going to be the kinds who crush you and stop you from spouting your ideas and so on. So for me, it's like that. It's, you have all these ideas and they can kind of grow in a Christian framework, but the more you're attacking and undermining the ideas that are holding up even your ability to come up with these ideas and talk about your ideas and so on, the more you're destroying not just the Christianity that you're attacking, you're attacking yourself. You're destroying yourself. And I think that's what like some atheists have been realizing in recent years. It's like, we've been attacking Christianity all these years, and something seems to be going wrong even for us. Now it seems that we're not getting this scientific utopia we dreamed we'd be getting. Everything seems to be falling apart, and we seem completely ineffective for dealing with something like Islam coming over. And guess what? If we atheists, because they have the lowest birth rates in any of the categories. I mean, just think about this. Hey, if we all convert to atheism, we'll get this scientific utopia. No, if you all convert to atheism, your birth rates drop through the floor, and your government will bring in a ton of Muslims, and you guys are completely ineffective at dealing with the spread of Islam, and you're going to be dominated by Islam, and you're not going to be atheists anymore. You're not going to be able to be in society. You're going to be crushed.
As Cosmic Skeptic demonstrated. I think I just want to say though that I mean you've kind of like hinted at the G.K. Chesterton idea of virtues gone wild, of liberalism, and that is very much true. G.K. Chesterton was onto it in that because liberalism itself undermines Christianity, it frees up these virtues that are now were at one time anchored within a matrix to just shoot off in all different kind of directions and cause all kinds of chaos. And certainly with progressive liberalism, we see a far more metastasized form of the cancer of classical liberalism in terms of its rapid spread and destructive ability to Western civilization. But I want to stress that liberalism itself is much more firmly rooted in our societies and in all of our thinkings than we actually recognize. And that is part and parcel of what is letting us down. And I'm certainly going to come on to demographics as one of the things. So I'll probably jump onto that now, since you've already touched upon it, which is, but let me just finish the point on liberalism first, which is that, Tom Holland made the kind of argument you made, which is that a lot of these ideas exist only because of a Christian backdrop. He said that we were atheist goldfish in a Christian fish bowl. But I would contend with people like Tom and Mel Scrivener and others that actually liberalism, even in its earliest form, right back into the 1600s and the 1700s, is a distortion of Christianity in that it puts all the weight loading, or all the weight bearing onto natural theology, and constructs its worldview out of natural theology. Think of the first statement of your Constitution, or was it your Bill of Rights? We believe. Well, how does it go? We believe these rights are to be inalienable.
Oh, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and so on. Yeah, that's the Declaration of Independence. That's when we say.
Right. So that is the very definition of naturalistic theology. There's no appeal to the apostolic tradition there. It is based upon natural theology, which is itself Christian. So liberalism is a mutation of something Christian. But until we Christians uncouple ourselves from these ideas and reestablish the kind of Christianity that's a bit more medieval in its thinking, though applied in a modern world, we're not going to be ideologically in a position to oppose Islamification properly. Because if you're committed to the American Constitution, then you're committed to the idea that Muslims can Islamify America, which is the problem that we've got in Europe. We're committed to the idea that Muslims can pursue Islamification. So that'll be the final point that I make on that, and I'll move on to my next point. Do you want to come back on that before I do?
Someone's telling me to respond to the super chats that involve you, but I'll just go ahead. I'll just go through the super chats real quick. Let's see. Yeah. What my only sort of additional thought on that point is like, how do I put this? Hard to argue with success and hard to argue with failure in the sense that, having a strong Christian backdrop in Europe, again, for 14th century, Islam is relentless. Islam is just relentless in attacking. It's just coming for you, and it will come for you. And if it doesn't work, it will go back, formulate a new plan, and come at you. And then if that doesn't work, they'll go back and regroup and come at. They're just obsessed with taking over. They're obsessed with taking over Europe and so on. And 14 centuries Christians were able to say no and repel it every single time. And to do it in different ways, because they had to do it militarily. Then they had to deal with it ideologically and stuff, because around the rise of the universities and so on, they started having Muslim scholars who were experts in like Aristotle and so on. They're like, hey, these guys are the experts in Aristotle. They've been studying and so on. So let's bring them in and so on. And then these guys started using this for like inroads to Islam. And you ended up with Thomas Aquinas, actually. Nope, can't do this. And so, but anyway, the point is Christians sort of stopped the military invasions multiple times, and they stopped the intellectual invasion of the ideas. And so say whatever you want, they were able to do it. And then you take a completely different sort of secular liberal framework, they can't invite it in fast enough, and it's like, and this will work. Okay. Everyone now is saying that it's a complete disaster. It's a complete disaster. So whatever else we talk about, whatever else we discuss, there is this big looming idea of this obviously worked pretty well, and that's obviously a disaster. I think that's something that like people are picking up on, even among the new atheists and so on, that however we thought this is going to work, it does not work. So reality does not conform to what people can make work in their mind. It makes perfect sense in your mind. Like matter of fact, the new atheists, when they came along, look at us. We're all very well educated sitting here at Oxford, and we don't need religion to get along in the world. We get along just fine without that superstitious nonsense. So why can't everyone just be like us? Let's just get rid of it and attack it, and then everyone will be like us. And then they find out everyone's not like them at all. But anyway, but now everyone's seeing it. Everyone's saying, okay, that worked pretty well. That doesn't work at all. We need something else. But it's like they don't have a plan B as far as like what they were doing.
They don't. In the UK, plan B is surrender. The establishment in the UK is already surrendering and pandering to the fullest. And the thing is, liberalism has no liberal reasons to oppose Islam. Liberalism is, by its very definition, an anti-Christian ideology. And funnily enough, it can only work if the population is broadly Christian. So I'm going to move on to my next point.
One second. We had some super chats for you. Some of them are for you. Let's see. Allah caused the power outage. You see, yes, Allah does this. He tried to keep AP running like Muslims with the Islamic dilemma. That's true. AP's running. Bob, any personal experience with, God willing, the beginning of the revival in the UK? Yeah, we've been seeing things about that over here. We've been seeing things about a revival in the UK. So we saw hints of it. We saw Ayan Hirsi Ali saying, hey, actually I'm a Christian now. We just went through an interview with Sargon of Akkad that we watched, and he was, even though he still considered himself an agnostic, he's saying he's taking his family to church, he says, because it feels weird to him to walk into a church. And he says, but he doesn't want his kids being like that, feeling weird in church. So he's making sure his kids are growing up in church and so on. And then I had Tim Dieppe on with me one day, and I had a different time where I interviewed I forget who, my brain is fried right now. But anyway, I did an interview with someone who did the research, and he says what he thought, which is the same thing we all think about the UK, that each generation is becoming more atheistic, and that if you go to the older generation, they would be the most Christian, and that as time goes on, the youngest generation is actually the most atheistic. And he showed it's actually the reverse from what we think it is. It's the older generation that's the most atheistic, and the young generation is the least atheistic. It doesn't mean they're all Christians or something. They're classing themselves as like spiritual and things like that. But it's let me say, there are good signs. There are good signs that you are actually in a position for a revival. But what's it like on the ground over there?
So, firstly, I would just say that, the British never stopped being metaphysical. They always had metaphysical beliefs. Research after research amongst academics always showed that people in the UK never abandoned supernatural or metaphysical beliefs. They just abandoned traditional Christian beliefs. But now those other metaphysical beliefs, like the communist ones or the liberal ones or the humanist ones or the progressive ones and the new age ones and have all seen themselves to be failing and all seem to be not working. And so people, partly because of the lockdown and also partly because of progressive liberal overreach in trying to impose a resented ideology on everybody, has resulted in people going, and also the Palestinian pro-terrorist marches that we've seen in the UK on a huge scale, unchallenged by the police. And the fact that we can see duplicitousness in our entire establishment around a range of issues, two-tier judiciary, two-tier police, two-tier, the cover-up of the rape gangs and so on, have caused a lot of people to start asking the kind of questions that, if they ask them, leads them to faith. Who is my what is my identity? What's the reason that I'm here? What is important? How should I live? And those are the kinds of questions that Christianity is ready to answer. And so looking at my inbox, the number of testimonials that I get, is telling me that amongst the conservative population of the UK, there is a definite revival. And because men tend to be more conservative than women, it's disproportionately landing amongst men than amongst women. What we're seeing in the Christian church is this weird phenomena where Christian women are moving further left and Christian men are moving further right. Or traditional versus liberal in their understanding of the church. And my inbox testifies to this in terms of just the number of people that I've got sending me messages saying that I've become a Christian, I've started reading the Bible, I want to go to church, which church should I go to, which is the best Bible to read. Like, I get these messages all the time. And so it's definitely happening, and there's real research to prove it. I'm sure you've probably heard the Quiet Revival study done by the Bible Society. That was a study of 10,000 people. So this is actual, genuine research. Mm-hmm. And there's lots of other stats to back this up. It's happening. But the point is, unless the church becomes the kind of church that will allow men to be men and allow masculine energy to flourish, which would be to its own benefit, this revival will be short-lived. And you know, that are there other chats you want to go to, or shall I make my next point on the
Oh yeah, we got a few more. Plus we have Exhibit A in all of this, talking about people seeing how the secular liberal system has failed. And we got the Apostate prophet with us, AP.
Decided that your electricity did work when you got called out, huh?
Yep.
Oh yeah. My electricity went out earlier, but then it started working again. So here I am.
Started working when he called you out for running from him.
Yeah. How are you doing? How are you guys doing?
I'm well, thanks be to God. Good to see you.
It's good to see you, Bob. Sorry, I'm kind of jealous. 'Cause I'm trying to do a British accent a little bit. Because I hear you do it, and it sounds.
It's not that spectacular.
But it's. I feel like it instantly makes it sound smarter. So maybe I should do it. I think you're doing it on purpose, to be honest. So.
Hey, that would be funny if all British people just pretend to have a smart accent, so we think they're smarter. Like that would be a funny skit. Like have all these British people and like Dawkins and everything. Well, this is what, and then you see them behind the scenes. They're like, "All right, what do you want to do next, everyone?"
Well, the truth is that behind closed doors, we talk like this. We talk like farmers with our combine harvesters. This is how we talk when we're not on camera. This is the language. This is the accent that we talk with.
Nice.
Bob, can you say they beat me in the desert?
They beat me in the desert.
Okay,
that's me doing an American accent. Sorry, they beat me in the desert.
Can you say it like a Welshman?
No, I can't do a Welsh accent, and every time I try, I sound like I'm trying to pull off a Pakistani accent, and that would not be acceptable in the UK.
Can you do Irish?
Yeah, I can do an Irish.
Yeah, try an Irish.
All right. They beat me in the desert.
It has to be more dramatic, like they beat me in the desert, like something like that.
They beat me in the desert.
Okay, good.
Close. The thing about the Irish accent is you got to talk as if the words are just tripping out of your mouth all the time, and you just talk with the tip of your tongue.
That's
pretty
beautiful,
good.
Man.
That's how you do an Irish accent. We can do a Scottish accent as well if you want, but you know.
Yeah.
A Scottish accent would be, they beat me in the desert.
They beat me in the desert.
Pretty good.
Assassinax beat me in the desert. They whipped me and they took my kilt.
Yeah. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Nice.
But hey, good to see you, Bob. Good to be on the same live stream. I know we've been trying to get together for quite a while now.
I mean, you say we've been trying. I think what you really mean there, Ridvan, is I've been trying. I've been trying, and you've been running away.
Okay, fine.
This is all true.
It's all right. It's good to see you, though. I'm glad we're all here at last.
Good to see you.
All right,
right, shall I get on?
No, we'll zoom through these real quick. D-Wood the Destroyer and Bob the Builder, blessed. Yes. Long-time watcher, first-time super chatter, very thankful for you all. May God bless you in your efforts. AP is scared and no longer based. Well, he showed up, so he overcame his fear. David, isn't this right in the middle of when you usually sleep? Yes, it's kind of towards the end of when I usually sleep. God bless you, Bob. Best regards from Brazil. Islam is satanic. I see it. And Muhammad is a chomo. Well, that's very, very Islamophobic language there.
Pretty rude.
Can you fix it, Bob the Builder? That's what we're talking about, ladies and gentlemen. Talking about fixing it. We Catholics with our Orthodox and Evangelicals have all got to put aside our theological differences and our egos, myself included, to confront Islam. No, we must
confront Orthodox.
No, we must humiliate each other. I am about to learn a big lesson soon.
Iran.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I wonder, because we've been told we're going to learn a huge lesson from Iran today. Thankful that our church fellowship here in the UK has just done a sermon series on Islam. Wow, that's cool. Our teacher who did the series is Nigerian, so he's got a finger on the pulse. Christian Concern is doing good work. Yes, Nigerian Christians are well aware of the dangers of Islam, because they've been going through it a long time now. Dear Bob, nice to see you here. Please become Orthodox. Come to St. Sophia sometimes.
Yeah, let's start doing that. Let's talk about inter-Christian problems. This is all we need. This is all we need right now. Let's not be the main focus. Islam. Let's not focus on Islam. Let's talk about how we should be this and we should be that, and this one is better and that one is better, and how dare you do this wrong and how dare you do that wrong. Let's do that. That's a very, very good idea.
Let's see. Bob is wrong about U.S. Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. Founding Fathers said we need Christianity, a morally and religious population.
I know the quote that he's making. Or I don't know.
That's specifically John Adams right there. John Adams, who said that our Constitution was made for a moral and religious people. It will not work for any other.
Yeah, but he was wrong.
Yeah.
But I want to make another point. I've got other points to make, bro. So, I've got a lot of points to get through, and I'm conscious it's 45 minutes in, and I've made one point.
Okay, I'll rapid fire the rest of these unless it's something really important to our discussion. Bob is wrong about... Wait, hang on, I already saw it. Let's see. What is the coolest or most unlikely conversion story to Christianity you've personally witnessed or seen? We'll have to save that. I've seen a bunch of doozies, and I've been a doozy for a lot of people. But, yeah. Not all of us British have given up and are prepared to fight in many ways we can. Deus Vult. You should sign up with Bob's Army. I'm a British woman, and I find Church of England churches very feminine and soft. Be all nice. Avoid anything controversial. Need boldness back in sermons. I'm assuming you would agree with that, Bob.
Absolutely. But not just in sermons. It's more than sermons. But I'll come on to that.
Any thoughts on Israel and Iran war, maybe fulfillment of prophecy written in Ezekiel 38? We'll have to say that for a different discussion. The problem is Protestantism, especially the American kind. It's made people think that's what Christianity is. We ain't going to win over atheism until we win over them. That's right. Destroy Protestantism first. Bob, they beat me in the desert is the latest catchphrase based on male Welsh nurse confronting Egyptian riot police in the recent march to Gaza.
Right. That's what he was going on about.
Yeah. Masculine Christianity without violence or so-called self-defense vengeance belongs to God. Let's see. Happy the YouTube...
Christianity doesn't teach pacifism.
That's true. Happy the YouTube algorithm really God made me find you all. That's good. Last two here. Am I the only one who can't take people with a British accent fully seriously? Yes, I say that respectfully.
You must be the only person.
And finally, there's a lot of disenfranchised young men who weren't raised by men. How can the church both market itself as well as instruct men who weren't raised by normal masculine men to be men without feminist shaming tactics? You might want to answer that one, Bob.
Well, I'd love to if people would stop sending in super chats.
There we go. You heard it here, folks. No more super chats. That's
right. I don't want to stop if people want to send in super chats. But okay, shall I go on to point 2 then?
Yeah, but this was actually a good one to address. Says there's a lot of disenfranchised young men who weren't raised by men. How can their church both market itself as well as instruct men who weren't raised by normal masculine men to be men without feminist shaming tactics? In other words, if you have men who are raised in a certain way, what can the church do?
All right. Well, I think I'm going to go on to point 2, and as I go through these points, you'll see that it does answer this question. Good. It will answer this question.
All right.
So point 2 is that Christians need to develop their own Christian identity. If we're going to reject liberal secular humanism and nationalistic identities or other ethnic identities, and we embrace or just pure hyper individualism, as in the progressive liberal world, well, we've got to build our identity on something, and that has to be four square, built upon what the faith teaches our identity as. You know, the scriptures call us a holy nation, a royal priesthood, a people set apart. In the letters of Peter, it talks about us being, Gentiles and Jews being united in the new man, in the epistles of Paul. And we're spoken of as being the body of Christ in Corinthians. We're spoken of as being the family of our Lord in the Gospels. And so we have to discover a deep sense of our own identity as Christians, that we are priest, prophet, and kings of the holy nation of God, that are offering up their souls and bodies to be a living sacrifice to the Lord in service and in pouring out our lives in libation to Him, and by doing so, bringing the kingdom of heaven to earth, so that the will of God is done on earth as it is done in heaven. And so by framing and understanding ourselves in completely Christian terms, without syncretism to nationalism, without syncretism to ethnicity, without syncretism to hyper individualism, but just reframing our lives within the Christian story is absolutely essential to the first point that I made. If we're going to reject liberal secular humanism, we've got to replace it with something, and that is a completely Christian identity, because it's from that Christian identity that we are going to be as resolute and as resolved as the Muslims that have come to us over 1400 years. The reason why the Christians, and you observed it yourself earlier, the reason why Christians had been successful in resisting Islam for 1400 years is because they were inspired by their Christian faith. And so this then flows out into other aspects like, what is it to be a Christian man? What is it to be a Christian woman? And a number of other things I'm going to touch on to later. But it's this idea of recovering a uniquely universal, complete and deep Christian identity and framing the whole of our lives in what the scripture says that we are as the church, as the people of God, and not syncretizing that with other identities that would pull us off track and pull us off our purpose as a nation and as a people.
Now, that's interesting there, because normally what I emphasize is just sort of it's sort of like a bare minimum of, hey, recognize that human beings are created in the image of God, and that when you are, if you're degrading yourself or degrading another person, you're like degrading the image of God. And like the demonic systems of the world are sort of hell-bent on degrading the image of God. So I'm normally saying, hey, recognize that you're created in the image of God, that other people are created in the image of God, that Christ is the perfectly functioning image of God that you should model. Like, that is how you are supposed to be functioning in the world. So I emphasize that, but you're talking about like the full expanded version of here's what you are supposed to be. Like, yeah, you're created in the image of God, but now you're supposed to be like priests and kings and everything else, and be what you're supposed to be in like all its splendor and glory.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is, the Amatio Dei is absolutely one of the separating values between Christianity and Islam, as you well know. Christians believe that everybody has innate dignity from birth, regardless of any other factor at all. And whereas Islam does exactly the opposite. Your value as a human being is dependent upon your gender and your religion. And depending on where you sit on that spectrum, you're going to be valued higher. And then amongst your gender, it's how religious you are. So the caliph and the ulamas are higher than your average men. your Muslim men are higher than your Muslim women. Your Muslim men and women are higher than your Christian and Jewish men. Your Christian and Jewish men are higher than your Jewish and Christian women. And so the spectrum goes down. And this is absolutely one of the reasons why anyone with a brain should oppose Islamization. That's how, and why atheists can, and why liberals should, and why anyone with just some ounce of intelligence should seek to oppose Islamization. But what I'm saying for the church, so narrowing in on the church, is that our identity obviously shares in that Immatio Dei, but it is more than that. It is what we are supposed to be in our truest sense of our humanity and living out that dignity as being made in the image of God, which is to be, as it were, God on earth, like God on earth. In you know, be perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect, is what our Lord said. Or and so as Christians, we're meant to embody Christ's image on earth and be icons of Christ on earth. And we can only do that if we sanctify and hallow our lives and offer it up to God as living sacrifice. And that is the act of priest. And then, you know, if we then, by bringing God's rule to earth by keeping his commandments in all areas of life, we begin to live out that role as king. And by proclaiming that same kingdom to those that are not of that kingdom and resist that kingdom, we also act as prophet. And so it's about Christians framing their life not within the story of America or the story of a particular ideology like communism or environmentalism, but framing our life within the story that is given to the church as part of its mission, which is not just, you know, evangelism. It's not just, making people convert to Christianity. It's more than that. It's as N.T. Wright talks about, the sort of transformation of the world to reflect the kingdom of God.
Now, Bob, all of this is very, very interesting and very good to listen to, very good to argue. A lot of good stuff to take from there. However, in all seriousness, although I dunked earlier on somebody who talked about orthodoxy, for example, I have some questions and some objections here, which mostly revolve around Protestantism and its role in how things have been shaped in the West. Now, for example, you mentioned that historically, there was a time when there was a very strong Christian identification, strong Christian identity in Western Christian Europe. For centuries, Christians or Europeans fought back against Islamization, fought back against Islamic invasions. The issue is that when we look at the timeline there and we break it down by religious denomination, the pushback was overwhelmingly, almost exclusively, if we speak of Western Christianity, done by the Catholics, not by Protestants, not by Anglicans. So if you want to rank it, the Catholics were the ones in history who most powerfully and most successfully pushed back against Islamic invasions. The Orthodox probably fought the most, but they were also brutally defeated. So the Catholics have a legacy of having a very, very strong pushback against them. The Protestants did basically nothing against Islam in their history. To be fair, they also didn't have much of a contact with Islam. Their contact was rather minimal compared considering the geography.
Yeah, AP. But when you were saying everything there, I was thinking in terms of geography. Like the Orthodox were the ones who were closest to an expanding Islam, and so they were quickest to get eaten up. And then even in Europe, on the East and the South were being attacked by Islam, which those were the Catholic areas, and the Protestant areas were more north and west, so they weren't confronting. So you're basically giving us a geography lesson, not a lesson on Christianity.
Well, also
I
less
think
on Christianity, to be honest, because I think that there's one issue here, which I think, in my opinion, is a problem, and I don't want to make this a criticism, but just bring it up as an objection to talk about it. Because so one of the problems that we talk about is, for example, internal fighting versus external fighting, right? Internal fighting versus defending against the others. Internal fighting, and everybody knows me. You know me. This is not meant to be stirring the making internal
during the
fights
pot.
or anything, but we know that Protestantism has been at the forefront of rather having, since its emergence, of having an inner fight rather than a fight against the outside.
Yeah.
Protestantism is kind of the proponent of individualism. You could even argue, this is something that is argued often, that individualism is kind of a result of Protestantism. So you talk about, for example, the church uniting, Christians uniting, becoming one body, but many Protestants, because of Protestant tradition, would argue that would kind of cherish the fact that Protestantism gives people this whole way of being distinct, of dividing the church into multiple different bodies that all disagree with each other, whereas the Catholic, for example, stand united, or the Orthodox stand semi-united.
Okay.
So this is a problem.
So let me come back to that, because you make some excellent points, very good points, and so obviously, I think just some points on the history. Obviously, within Eastern Orthodoxy, you had 400 years of wars of Eastern Orthodox Christians in Eastern Europe fighting for their liberation. And actually, the country that liberated the most land from Muslim rule is arguably Russia, which is an Orthodox country, which destroyed entire caliphates and liberated huge amounts of land of Eastern Orthodox, and wanted to liberate Constantinople until the devil got his teeth into Russia with communism. And so it wasn't the case that, yes, the Eastern Orthodox were brutally suppressed in large swathes and often came off worse. They never actually gave up, and they did liberate themselves and fight continuously for centuries, at least 1,000 years, against the Turks, Seljuk, and Ottoman. And yes, it's absolutely right to say that most of the fight back happened under the Catholics. That's absolutely true, but that's because historically, those are the churches that were there, and Protestantism didn't arrive until about 500 years later. I know that all across Europe, when the Catholics won the Battle of Lepanto, even in Protestant countries, bells rang out in celebration. But there has been, in the past, certainly, an attitude among certain hardline Protestant opinions, which is, of siding with Muslims against Catholics because of anti-Catholic hatred. So just some points on the history. But we don't, as Christians, have to be defined by the past.
Yeah.
The very point of our faith is that we can practice repentance and that we can change. That is the whole point of the deep heart of Christian spirituality. And I think it's fair to say that a lot of Protestant churches are waking up and as it were, whether they know the history or not, they are repenting of those kinds of attitudes. And rather than, as it were, stirring up issues from the past, we in this generation need to think about where we are now and draw a line under anything wrong in the past, like the fourth, in quote marks, crusade, because it wasn't a crusade at all, that attacked Constantinople and weakened Constantinople, and that was a Catholic on Orthodox attack. We need to think about what we need to do today, and build a unity. So, if I may, before you come back on that, I'm going to leave to one side the question of individualism, because I don't think that comes from Protestantism. I think that comes from the Enlightenment, but we could debate that separately. I'm gonna just talk about ecumenism, because it is one of the points that I want to raise, and it is directly connected to what you've just said. So One of the other, a third thing that we need to do as Christians is we need to embrace an ecumenical spirit. Now, an ecumenical spirit doesn't pretend that we don't have serious disagreements, because we do. And it doesn't pretend that there hasn't been historical rivalries in the past, because there has. What this new spirit of ecumenism that the church needs to adopt is simply that Christians recognize that there are some things that are threats to all of the Christendom, to all churches, to all Christians, regardless of your denomination, of which communism is one. Progressive ideology is another, but Islam and Sharia law is another. And of all of those ideologies that are a threat to the church, including ethno-nationalism, Nazism and fascism, for instance, the one that has been the most intransigent and oldest foe of the church has been Islam. And so, for the sake of repelling and pushing back against Islamization and reversing Islamization, Christians need to accept that we're going to draw a line under the past. We're going to accept that we've got doctrinal differences, but we are going to work together to push back and reverse Islamization, not just in the West, but also across the Islamic world. And it has to be a unity based on what we're against rather than what we are for, because that's the easiest kind of unity to establish. The enemy of my enemy is my friend kind of logic. Well, all Christians of all denominations are the enemies of Sharia law. And so we are all friends, therefore, to one another. And that means that we have to put on a back burner these kinds of differences that you've just highlighted, draw a line under the past. Maybe in maybe some future generation of Christians, when Islam is totally defeated, can then start arguing and debating about all of these things that divide us. But for now, as Christians, we need to work together and not work against one another.
I agree with that. I agree with that completely, and I think that I think people need to definitely prioritize togetherness, prioritize a reasonable and good form of ecumenism within Christianity to help each other. I mean, not just for the fight against Islam, but also in order to to elevate, enlighten, share goodness with each other and all that. The Christian world has spent too much time with infighting and partially still does, although much less violent than in the past. So that definitely needs to be done. My issue was more with so there is a historical aspect. There's much more that I could go into if you want to talk about the history. I think that there are lots of grievances with, especially when the Reformation began with Martin Luther and the things that he said and did, and is in relation to Islamization as well, and so on. But I just think that this is not meant to be a criticism of Protestantism. But it's like I'm just asking questions.
Candace.
Go for it. Yeah, go for it.
No, I'm just I have difficulties trying to envision the unity that you speak about when we, especially when we're talking about Protestantism, and especially when we're talking about non-Anglican Protestantism, like American Protestantism or other kinds of Protestantism, for example, because it seems to me that there seems to be often the tendency, and although the Catholic Church is nowadays not as united as it was in the past, since there is no longer the whole papal authority over everybody, or the papal state, or whatever you want to call it, there still is some kind of unity among Catholics in terms of the current way of thinking, the current politics and policies, and so on. It seems to be very difficult to me to establish unity among Protestants, let alone between Protestants and other churches or denominations or traditions. So you need to establish for Christians to come together and to be one body, to be one church, as it was seen in the apostolic sense, and to then come together and to do something together seems to be very, very difficult. And how do you go about doing that? How do you establish that unity when there is so much pushback within based on certain dogmatic positions and practices and all that.
So it would be, to adopt the position, for instance, of Gavin Ortland, who is a Baptist, who has his own YouTube channel. He's a great evangelist and a great commentator. And he often talks about triaging dogma. And I've come up with a very similar attitude. What I do is I triage questions of dogma. And what I realize is that very often the things that we need to get worked up about are not actually questions of doctrine, because Christians agree on far more that is fundamental than they disagree upon. And the things that they disagree upon are of secondary, tertiary, or even other degrees outwards from central importance. The things that are of central importance, Christians totally agree on in the thing, i.e. the things that make you a Christian. And in terms of the things that actually divide Christians, it's often more to do with ethical questions and the penetration of liberalism within the churches than anything else. But I think it's about understanding that these theological differences are not as important or as pressing as the socio-political and economic pressures that we are facing as Christians. And for us to refocus our intellectual energy onto how we deal with those socioeconomic and political pressures that are opposing Christianity. Because the ideologies that are against us are ideologies of praxis, not ideologies of orthodoxy. And so, Christians fall out over questions of orthodoxy, right worship. But the ideologies that are raimed against the church are ideologies of praxis. Islam is about seizing power and dominating. Liberalism is about seizing power and dominating. Progressivism is about seizing power and dominating. Communism, seizing power and dominating. Nazism, seizing power and dominating. They are more concerned with how to get power and use it than they are disputing the metaphysics of transubstantiation, or whether grace is communicated through baptism, or what is the proper government of the church. Does it belong to patriarchs? Does it belong to the congregation, or does it belong to a pope? These Christians are completely being outmaneuvered by the fact that they try to think about everything theologically, when they need to be thinking more sociologically, politically, and economically. And so the unity that I'm talking about, bro, is not institutional unity. It's not dogmatic unity. It's unity in praxis, in what we are against, and making sure that those groups that are working against the church never have the power to dominate and persecute the church, and where they are dominating and persecuting the church, that they are removed from power.
Yeah, I agree with that very much, to pretty much everything you said. And I think, so the point that you make, the distinction that you made there at the end, is actually a very crucial one, which is that as much as there are differences, as much as there are doctrinal differences of interpretation and all that, everything could be left to, you could separate that separation from the unity that we need to have among all those Christians who disagree on so many things, that they could come together and could establish a unity with disagreements. So I have to say also, and I'm really, I'm not trying to bash Protestantism or anything here. I would say,
because that wouldn't go well for you, buddy. That wouldn't go well for you.
I think like Orthodox people will probably be angry when I say this, but I think that the Orthodox are the worst in terms of unity with the rest of Christians.
I'm trying to resist. I'm trying to resist. I could point out things in Orthodoxy,
but like, I'm just trying to establish the point of unity. But I think you made that distinction pretty clear there. So
yeah,
thank you.
I mean, the thing is, all of our traditions have their problems, and so I'm going to pick on all the traditions just because I'm an ecumenist, and therefore, if I'm going to pick on one group, I pick on everybody. So Catholics, they might have better unity, but they are going very soft on Islam, and they are possibly the worst evangelists of the Muslim population. Yeah, Protestants divide over everything that they possibly can. And if you look at churches in Nigeria, it's literally just a business. And to some degree, Protestantism in America has that as well. It's almost business-like. Look at Joel Osteen, Creflo Dollar, and such folks. And they'll split over the smallest possible thing. But Protestants also are doing great missionary work around the world and have so far been the best missionaries into the Islamic world, working in areas where Christianity is oppressed and is otherwise suppressed. So yeah, they've got problems, but they're also doing good stuff. But
well,
the
I
Orthodox,
agree with that. I think that the Protestants.
wait, I'm picking on everybody. I haven't picked on the Orthodox Church yet, so I'm going to finish that one. Right? The Orthodox Church.
Don't stop him before that, AP. Nice try, though.
Yeah, nice try, AP. But the point is, the Orthodox Church right now is ripping itself through actual war. Russia is waging war against Ukraine. Their impartial schism with the Patriarch of Constantinople, the monks at Athos. Is it Athos? Where's the Athos? Athos have just said that they're going to limit people based upon ethnicity coming to the island. Orthodoxy's got its problems. Orthodoxy has got its problems because of the penetration of nationalism into church life. All of our churches have problems. Yeah. But the point is, all of those problems are going to be worse if we end up being dominated by Sharia law.
Yeah.
And so it's about
100%.
having perspective. So in other words, my solution to this is, Ridvan, go and sort out the problems in the Orthodox Church, leave the Protestants alone. David, go and sort out the problems in the Protestant Church, leave the Catholics and the Orthodox alone. I'll go and sort out the problems, or not me, because I'm an ecumenist. Roman Catholics, go and sort out the problems in the Roman Catholic Church, leave the Orthodox and the Protestants alone. Everybody's got issues to work on in their own church. And Christ said, remove the plank from your own eye before you try to take the speck out of your brother's.
That's very beautiful.
Yeah.
Shall I move on to
And I do agree that Protestants have been the most active and the strongest in terms of evangelizing, and also in terms of speaking out on Islam, for example. I mean, we know today that the majority probably of those who speak about and against Islam and its influence are Protestant, a lot of different backgrounds. And I think that's. I honestly actually think that the Orthodox are the weakest, because there are lots of Orthodox elements that seem to be, or that kind of do certain Islamist movements and organizations a great service in the Middle East, which is a huge shame. So everybody needs to become more aware of the dangers of Islam. Everybody needs to become more united, needs to be one.
And before you attack another denomination, sort out the issues in your church. No, everybody, and that is a good ecumenist attitude to have. Sort out the problems in your own church. Don't criticize others.
I need to say something about Catholics first. I said something bad about.
Wait. Can I before we go down that avenue? I'll just point out that, and then I want to move on with David's permission. Yeah. Both the Pope and the Patriarch of Moscow said that Christians worship the same God as Muslims. So before either of those groups criticize Protestants, they need to go and sort out their own hierarchy, because their own hierarchy is teaching heresy. So everybody's got issues to deal with in their own tradition. Focus on that, not on other people's traditions. Okay, I want to, if with David's permission,
one second,
point.
because you did have an objection here. 1 second, got two. God bless you, brothers Dizzle, Bob, and Apostate Prophet. You are in our daily prayers. God bless you all. Thank you. Then 1:20 a.m. in India. Good morning, good soldiers. Good morning. And here you have your objection. Snudgewick says Christianity does teach pacifism. Jesus never promoted violence. He who lives by the sword will perish by the sword. Do not repay evil with evil, etc. What would be your short answer to that, Bob, so we can move on?
Jesus made a weapon and used it in the temple. No one can look at what Jesus did in the temple and say that he was a pacifist. It just doesn't work. A pacifist doesn't behave like that, and a pacifist would condemn those actions because they're not pacifistic. The way that pacifists try to get around this problem is they create some kind of ridiculous exceptionalism for Jesus, where he fashions a weapon, uses it, forces his will on other people through an act of violence, and then pacifists say somehow that he's being prophetic, as if that somehow gets over the fact that he used violence to impose his will on others. And so, no, Christ was not a pacifist, and Christianity does not teach pacifism. The verses that the sister is quoting, I'm going sister because of the puppy image, and the name Snudgewick. It sounds like it might be feminine. Jesus said, "Those who live by the sword perish by the sword," but he had encouraged his apostles to buy swords, and he sent them away still carrying swords. He said, "Don't repay evil for evil." And I agree, we should not repay evil for evil. We should repay evil with justice.
Yeah, and I'll just add really quick, because I can see where people do get I can see how people interpret these passages as pacifistic and so on. But I mean, just think about it. He who lives by the sword will die by the sword. What's the context of that? His apostles thought they were signing up to conquer the Roman Empire, and when these guys, when Peter pulls his sword, that's what they're thinking. All right, now it starts. We're going to take over the Roman Empire and we're going to conquer the world. Put your sword back into its place. He who lives by the sword will die by the sword. That's not necessarily saying if someone attacks you, you have no right to defend yourself or something like that. Doesn't seem like you could interpret it that way. I don't think the context or the statement actually demands that interpretation. Then you have other things like rulers are here to rulers bear the sword for a reason and so on.
Romans 13.
Yeah. So, yes, Nudgewick, I think you recognize that your interpretations here aren't the only interpretations here, and that it's not the Bible that's actually compelling you to interpret these things in that way.
Yeah, it's liberalism.
Yep. Good.
Okay, shall I go on to my next point, or do you got other Snapchats?
Nope. Well, we've got more, but I know how opposed you are to.
It's just that I want to get on. I want to make sure that I get through the points, and if I get through all the points,
that's why. As you're going through your points, I'll just try to bring up like one or two super chats at a time, so just kind of spread them out. But yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So the next point is that if we accept that we are Christians, and as Christians we are a people group, a nation who have an identity of our own, that means that emerging from the fact that we are a people and that we have an identity, a politique emerges, a political agenda emerges. Now that agenda can be split into two. It can be split into those bits which are common to everybody, i.e. the common good, as it were. Things like everybody wants their streets to be clean and safe. Everybody wants their environment to be healthy. Everybody would like to have security to make sure that their home is not being broken into. These concerns we can share with anyone who has the amatio Dei. But then there are things that are unique to us as Christians, because we are disciples of Christ. We are part of the body of Christ, that we are being drawn into Christ. And these are things like, we don't want any law that stops the gospel from being evangelized, being spread abroad. We don't want to see our brothers and sisters being persecuted. We don't want Christian institutions being forced to betray their own value systems. And so as Christians, we should pursue our own political agenda. And if we are successful in that political agenda, we will end up with another Christendom. And so since that is the direction of travel from a Christian politique to a new Christendom, let's just go for it. Let us commit ourselves as Christians to establishing a new Christendom. And that means that the state itself will have a Christian identity, a Christian character, and a Christian outlook, framing its laws in Christian terms, though applying them equally to all. And then also pursuing a Christian agenda both in its national and international politics. And an example of this would be Russia. Russia is a country that has, in its internal home affairs, is pursuing more and more of a Christian agenda, though not completely, because constitutionally it's not Christian. It's a federal republic. But internationally, it's actually betraying Christ. It betrayed the Armenian Christians. It's waging war in Ukraine. It's failed. It attacked the Christians of Georgia. It has sided with all the enemies of the church: North Korea, Iran, China. Everywhere that persecutes Christians, Russia has made their ally. And so this is an example of where the orthodoxy of Russians hasn't gone deep enough. It needs to go deeper. The Russians need to be more orthodox, not less orthodox. They need to have an understanding that Mother Russia, her duty is not to serve herself, but to serve Christ. And that means defending Armenian Christians, defending Christians in Iraq and Syria, defending Christians in North Korea, defending Christians against Azerbaijan, not attacking Ukraine, and killing lots of Orthodox Christians there. And we could criticize Ukraine for its own problems, but we need to pursue a Christian agenda that leads to another Christendom, because a Christendom, as demonstrated by the Crusader states, and as demonstrated by the fact that many European kingdoms were established out of crusade, a Christendom can and has reversed Islam, whilst simultaneously, particularly with the Crusader states, actually treating its Muslim population better than they would be treated under an Islamic caliphate.
Yeah, the issue with Russia is also this is actually a good example of how you can go really, really wrong. I'm not sure how to exactly approach it and how to exactly put it, but so when somebody says that Russia, for example, is a country that goes toward the direction of adopting more, Christianity or Christian thinking or Christian sentiments as a nation, I cringe a little bit, because what they're doing is more to take Christianity and to act as if Christianity was their goal and their ideal, but they turn Christianity, they pervert Christianity. So that this is what the Russian government has basically done, what the Russian Federation has done, what the Orthodox Christian authorities in charge have done. They have started blending the religion with the government to such an extent where now the idea is basically that fighting for Russia, no matter against who, is a Christian duty. Going and fighting and killing in Ukraine, killing other Christians in Ukraine is a religious holy duty, and you will be rewarded for it, and so on. So this is one of the pitfalls. You could go really, really wrong with this and start corrupting Christianity for your own benefit.
It's the idea that the state should serve Christ, not the church serve the state. And that's the difference between a truly Christian state and a state that pretends to be Christian. Is in Russia, the church is serving the state. In England, the church is serving the state. A truly Christian state sees itself as serving Christ and pursuing Christ's agenda. And if we are truly rooted in our Christian identity, the idea of bearing arms against the temple of God, which is embodied in other Christians, should be an anathema to us. And an extension of this understanding of a Christian politique is that Christians need to have a sense of solidarity with one another. The plight of a persecuted Christian anywhere is the cause of all Christians everywhere. And even if we can't do much about it, it still should be a concern to us. And so the issues of, the Christians who've been forced out of northern Cyprus, the Christians who are under threat in Lebanon, in the Philippines, in Burma, in North Nigeria, in Iraq, the Christians that were forced out in Artsakh or Greater Armenia, occupied territory in Azerbaijan. These Christians, the Christians of Egypt, the Christians of Pakistan, the Christians of India, we're all in this together, and we all need to stand together, and we need to find ways to help one another around the world as a church, regardless of whether the states of nation states support us or not. And that is an essential part of what I'm sort of talking about is Christian solidarity.
Now, Bob, you're talking about Christianity and politics and so on. So are you suggesting something along the lines of Christians being more influential in politics, or is it like Christians go and overthrow the government and put in a new Christian government in your country or something like that?
I mean, it depends upon the context. Like, you know, the Christians of South Sudan, they faced 18 years of Islamic Jihad, and they had no choice. They had either to be dominated by Islam, Arabized, and maybe even forcibly converted to Islam, or they rose up in rebellion. And the Christians of South Sudan rose up in rebellion. The Christians of North Nigeria, I think, need to start an independence movement and split the country in two, because their state is dysfunctional, is not guaranteeing the security of Christians. Mm-hmm. But in the USA and the UK, where we have, to a degree, highly functioning democracies, you know, where corruption levels, you know, in the UK it's getting worse, but corruption levels in the state can still result in a change, still don't stop a change of government, as demonstrated by Trump's victory. In those situations, Christians should work within the democratic system, get involved in politics, capture the state, and then use the state for the purpose of serving Christ. So I'm going to make an open appeal right now to J.D. Vance. Use the might of America's armed forces to defend persecuted Christians.
Yeah. And I would agree, especially about Nigeria. If anyone is in a position to help that situation, guys, it's pretty simple. You've got Muslims up here, kind of a line, Christians down here, and Muslims constantly trying to push back that line by killing as many Christians as possible.
And butchering the Christians in the north. There is a genocide happening in the north, and America could very quickly change the game on that one. Mm-hmm. You know, America is backing Israel. Why not back the Christians of Lebanon? Why not call out Turkey's occupation of northern Cyprus? You know, there's so much that a Christian nation could do. And I'll put this out as well, you know, to Christians in Russia, challenge your government. Why isn't this, you know, this so-called Christian government doing more to defend Christians? To Christians in Hungary, you know, the president there makes a big show and dance of his Christianity, thanks be to God. Well, let him use the might of the Hungarian state to help persecuted Christians. You know, this is the way that Christians need to be thinking, you know.
Couple quick super chats, and then Bob can go on to his next point. AP, did you check out Sabaton? They also made a song based on the Crusades called The Last Stand. Also check out Nooks Taku is cool character. You have music suggestions here. So grateful to God for bringing Bob and D Wood and AP together. I hope for Christian tenderness between Bob and AP, and that they stop attacking each other and hating each other constantly. Gracious words, seek peace and pursue it. And
I love AP. AP's great, and I know he loves me, so we're all good.
I do.
And we have, I'm an AI app builder trying to contact AP and D Wood for a collab in apologetics, but can't find any contact info anywhere. How do I contact you for business? You should be able to find my email address on my homepage, my home page on YouTube. AP, how can people contact you there?
I'm not sure if he can hear us because he said he's an AI. So,
Just speak in a robot voice, and then AP will understand. I mean, AI.
Yeah, you can contact me on Twitter or on the email address that you can find on my About page.
All right, there you got it. There you got it, everyone. All right, back to you, Bob.
Okay, so the next point is that a lot of Christians are very fearful, and they live in a culture of fear. They're very easily intimidated. And they don't want to upset the cart. They don't want to get on the wrong side of the law. They don't want to be seen as the bad guy. And I think a lot of that is because of a soft soy kind of Christianity, you know, that has been, you know, cultivated because of the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment has discipled the church. And we need to recover the love of martyrdom in the church. We need to recover the love of dying for our Lord, and not being afraid to be the bad guys. If you look at our Lord himself was seen as the criminal. You know, he was executed as a criminal. All of the great apostles were all seen as the bad guys, apart, you know, and all of them, bar John, were killed as criminals, as the bad guys of their age. And if you look at the saints down through history, you know, including the saint that burnt the image of Lenin, and then ended up having his entire life ruined. I forget his name. Christians are not frightened to be the bad guy. The saints of the church have not been frightened to be the bad guys. And we need to get back to loving the idea that we are friends of God and enemies of the world. And if that leads to our martyrdom, if that leads to our suffering, then we should embrace it and rejoice and be glad, because so they persecuted the prophets before us, you know, and so they also persecuted our Lord. And we need to recultivate this love of martyrdom, this love of suffering for the kingdom, this love of suffering for the cause of our Lord Jesus Christ, and suffering for the truth. But a lot of Christians are very fluffy and very limp-wristed, more in Catholic and Protestant churches than in Orthodox churches. I find things in the Orthodox churches a bit firmer, a lot firmer actually. But we need to recover that sense of, we're not stopping, we're not giving up, we're not backing down, we're pressing forward, and you can kill us if you want to, but we're not giving up. And persecute us if you want to, but we're not stopping. And if that upsets progressives, so be it. If it upsets Muslims, so be it. If it upsets, communists, so be it. If it upsets nationalists, so be it. If it upsets ethno-nationalists, so be it. We need to push on being Christian.
Very well said.
On that point of not being afraid to be labeled the bad guys and so on, that's kind of connected to other things that were being pointed out. We talked about a study in the UK about the youngest generation unexpectedly turned out to be the least atheistic generation, which would have been the opposite of what I would have thought. But then even in the US, there was for decades, there was this decline in the percentage of people who identify as Christian. And then several years ago, it sort of bottomed out and then started going back up. And the idea as far as people who are looking at the data was that the people who were leaving Christianity were people who didn't care about it much. They were kind of nominal Christians, and it was easy to go in and say, "Hey, why you don't even believe in this stuff? What are you doing? Get out of here!" Or if you're kind of wishy-washy, "Hey, do you realize you're being all this is a bunch of stupid stuff? Be with the smart group, the atheist group, and so on." So you could actually get those kinds of people, but when it kind of bottomed out, now it was kind of okay. We've reached the level of people who are taking Christianity seriously, and you guys don't actually have good arguments to respond to them. And then that starts kind of growing back up. But there's the positive side in all of this is the people who can be pushed around by saying, "Hey, if you disagree with us, we'll call you names. We'll call you the bad guy. We'll call you intolerant. We'll call you racist. We'll call you Islamophobe," things like that. Those people kind of already left. You know what I mean? The people who could be pushed around by name calling and so on. Okay, you already won those people. Now you're down to people who you can't push around by calling them names. It's not going to work anymore, right? So even though you may have gotten down to smaller numbers, your smaller group isn't as easy to push around as other groups. In other words, look at us here. You can call us all the bad guys. It doesn't affect us. Us. We're fine. I'm fine taking a bite out of the Qur'an if someone crosses a line, right? And I'm fine if people go, "I can't believe what you just did. It's the worst thing in the world." Say whatever you want. Don't care. So anyway, that is kind of the plus side as far as you saying, Christians shouldn't be worried about, what people are going to say about us or what they're going to call us, or that we're
or even dying.
Yeah, or that we'll be the bad guys, or what's going to happen to us and so on. It's actually cool because we have a smaller group than we did years ago, but it's a group that's not as easy to push around with things like that. So,
and I think that truth is certainly amplified in the apologetic world that we move in. You know, Christians who do apologetics, particularly Christians who do public apologetics, we're pretty resolute and emotionally committed. But I know, and maybe it's different in America, but I know in the UK there's still a lot of fluffy Christianity. There is still a lot of Christianity that if you blew hard at it, it would just fall over. And, you know, and the Muslims sense that, the Ummah senses that, the activists within the Muslim community sense that. And the reason why it's so weak is because they do not desire, they're not enthralled by the idea that they might sacrifice their lives for our God. And we should be in love with the idea that we could sacrifice our lives for our God and wear the crown of glory. When I think go on.
Oh, continue when you're done.
I was just going to say, is it Saint Stephen in the Book of Acts when he's martyred? When he looks, I'm rubbish with names. When he looks up to heaven, he sees the Lord standing. Mm-hmm. You know, and the thing is, the Lord stands when the martyrs die. And that such an honor should enthrall us so much that the thought of dying for Jesus is something that we could look forward to as a good thing. And the thing is, if you lose your fear of death, if you get to that point where you fear no man because you fear him who, once he's destroyed the body, can cast the soul and body into hell, if you lose your fear of any mortal danger, then you become more than a conqueror. You know, but lots of Christians are not living that out because they're scared to die. They're scared to suffer.
And by the way, that's kind of connected to everything else. It's Christianity can be really sort of successful at building societies, but once you've built a flourishing, stable society, people become more hedonistic because of it, and you're able to just focus on living an easy life, free from discomfort as much as possible, and so on. And then you're not willing to endure anything like persecution or discomfort, and it becomes easier to push you around with name calling and stuff because you don't want to be the bad guy. You haven't absorbed any of that. So anyway, you get this weird situation where, like, Christians will build some great society to live in, but then they become like more pleasure oriented and, hey, we don't want any pain, or we don't want any suffering. We don't want to suffer for anything. We don't want to suffer for God. We don't have to, because life is so good here. But once you get to that point where you're not focusing on what gave you the ability to make that kind of society to begin with, then it'll start crumbling. And sort of it's a weird situation where once you start turning away from God, your society starts degenerating, but ultimately you're going to become less hedonistic when your society starts breaking down, and you'll get to the point where you can actually be a person who stands up for things again. And so you get this weird sort of this ebb and flow here.
And this comes on to another point, which is more directly to that question that you wanted me answer is, how do we raise men? Because the thing is, if the church is going to capitalize on this quiet awakening that's occurring, and if the church is going to build on the momentum and rise to the occasion of the challenge that we now face, we have to cultivate chivalry. And when I talk about chivalry, I'm talking about the Christian warrior code that was formed in medieval Europe to turn savage warriors into gentle men. And we need that code again in a modernized, revised form to turn gentle men into warriors. And that doesn't mean that they stop being gentle, which is really important. You know, C.S. Lewis wrote about this. He wrote about the importance of chivalry. And he said that the chivalrous Christian knight was a work of art. You know, it is someone who is meant to be able to break skulls on the battlefield, but then before the weak, before, the woman, be dainty and gentle, and those be in front of the orphan and the widow is someone who is gentle and kind and compassionate. But before the mujahideen, before the communist militant, they can be as hard as iron, and they can go toe-to-toe with anyone. And we need to get the church into a place where everybody talks of the Christians and says this: the Christians don't look for trouble and they don't start trouble, but you don't want to cross them. You don't want to bring trouble to them. And if we can get to that place where people think of Christians in that way, I think we've struck the balance correctly. That people go, Christians are really lovely people so long as you don't wrong them. But if you wrong them, you better run.
And by the way, this actually goes further back. Plato brought this issue up in the Republic when they're trying. He's like trying to design like the perfect society or something like that, and get to the issue of what your soldiers are supposed to be like. And then he spends time talking about how you raise like the ultimate soldiers, the most feared army in the entire world. But then they run into this problem. Hey, if we have this just brutal, just most feared army in the world, extremely aggressive, don't back down from anything, ready to die on a moment's notice. Those are the kinds of guys who will just take us over and conquer us for themselves. And so what do we do? How do we do this? And he starts trying to wrestle with the idea of how you can have two natures in one person, as it were, this extremely aggressive, violent person when needed, and also completely gentle and friendly under different circumstances. Like, is it possible to have these two things together? And then he thinks of the example of a good dog. He's like, a good dog, you can leave with your baby, and your baby is totally safe around your dog. But someone else comes along that the dog doesn't know, and the dog is ready to go right for its throat. So he concludes that it is possible. It is possible to have this. And I would say, yes, the chivalrous knight is like Christianity reached like the perfect version of this. But in recent decades, I don't know, I'm guessing things are similar in Europe, but over here in the U.S., it's any concept of any man standing up for anything is bad, and men just need to be these dainty little. You just need to be the dainty little weak thing. And then what happens over and over again? You get all these video clips and so on of like a woman is being beaten up on a train or something like this. There'll be 10 guys around. They're all sitting there doing nothing, and they won't lift a finger anymore because they've been trained their entire lives. You're actually it's bad. It's bad if you're the sort of guy who would jump in to a situation like that and so on. And so, and it's funny because now women are confused. What's going on here? A guy can just beat me, take me, grab my purse, take my daughter, whatever, right in front, and you guys just won't stand up. It's like, that's what guys were trained to be now for the past several decades.
And it's either that, or you end up being the kind of thug that would beat a woman up. You know, you're either an uncontrolled thug or you're a total coward. And what we need is the opposite of both. We need men of martial discipline who have it under control and who are guided by a moral and ethical code. And you know, some people might go, oh, but you know, Christ said, "Don't resist evil," you know, but Christ also said, "Love and serve one another," and you can't claim to love someone, your brother and sister, if you're going to let them get raped. You can't claim. No one would believe you if you said, "I love my mother, but I let someone rape her." Like. Those two statements are contradictory. If you love, you defend. If you love, you guard, you protect. You know, and so as Christians, when Christ says, you know, don't resist evil, he's not talking about don't love. He's having this. He's teaching this idea of accepting your fate. In the sense of there is evil in the world and God has permitted that evil, and we should have a kind of spirit that when an evil can't be resisted, as in the sense of it is upon us, it is what God has allowed to happen to us, then we should accept it with a kind of profound humility in knowing that God is working out his purposes. But when he's talking about loving and serving one another, then that means that when we can prevent an evil, as it talks about in Romans 13's 1-7, it talks about the government being instituted for the prevention of evil and for the keeping of righteousness, then when we can prevent an evil in the service of our brothers and sisters, then we should do so. And as Christians, I think sometimes Christians don't wrestle with these issues enough. And they exegete verses in the scripture poorly in isolation, ignoring other aspects of scripture. When actually often scripture is holding things in tension. And depending on the circumstances, you're either going to push down on one pedal or you're going to push down on the other one. But whichever pedal you push on, it's going to propel you forward in terms of your sanctification or your theosis. Shall I go on to my next point, or do you want to do some super chats?
1 second. We'll do this. Wanted to get down to one real quick. We have Vlad the Impaler here. Yes, that's true. In Islam, your value depends on the size of your zabiba. Yes, they're definitely impressed by a big, giant zabiba. AP, release the zabiba song. What are you waiting on? Wrong, AP. Here you go. Wrong, AP. Say filioque and watch Orthodox and Catholics fight to the death. Infighting is a problem present within all traditions. Anything not gospel isn't worth fighting about, in my opinion.
But that's literally what I just said. After pointing out that there is a problem of unity among Protestants, I also did point out that the Orthodox are pretty bad at unity with others. So
yeah. And also the resolution to this is that each member of each denomination just work on improving their own denomination. There's enough to sort out in your own tradition without you wasting any energy criticizing another tradition. And the whole filioque thing is, I think, quite easily resolved.
Yeah,
I mean, there are also greater implications through that, which is why the whole disagreement on the Immaculate Conception and all that came forth, and so on. So there's a lot going on there. You could totally work these things out, but yeah,
you could work these things out. But also in terms of working them out, what's more important to us in terms of debate, we having word fights or making sure that we don't get checkmate in the Senate, the Parliament, the courts, the police. It's like, get a sense of priorities, people. Some of you just obsess about these things because otherwise you're just not brave enough to get involved in the bigger struggles and the real battles that the church faces. And so you make yourself into a big man by having word fights. That's essentially like a guy going up to another guy and going, That's
what AP does.
Get in a real fight, guys.
Well, this is very good.
A culture and a civilization.
It's very good. It's a very good point, and I think you can have extremely strong disagreements. You can have very strong disagreements on doctrine. You can have very strong disagreements among Christian denominations, among Christian groups and traditions on certain things. You could still, despite that, I don't know why you can't. You could still work all of that out and get together to work together as Christians, despite your heavy disagreements, despite heavily disagreeing on these issues that you consider so crucial and so a matter of life and death. You could still come together and have some kind of unity. You could still come together and be brothers. I'm not sure why it would be so difficult.
One more right after this one. Let's see. Kamini is hiding, boy. They hit him in the desert. Yeah.
They beat me in the desert.
They beat me in the desert. Okay, here you go, guys. What can we do and say to our brothers and sisters that don't see the danger we see? It's so easy to fall into the trap of being Islamophobic or don't want to talk about these things because they are afraid.
I think maybe you should just start calling them all weaklings and mocking them. Maybe that could work. I don't know.
That might actually be more effective than trying to explain things to them. Just stop being such a weakling, you little weakling.
Yeah, I think if you want to wake people up, I would suggest a number of things. One, tap into Tim Dieppe's work talking about Islamization. There's plenty of resources there. And, you know, it's a good, and use the UK as a good example of how Islamization can progress and then you can build the case from there. Another thing is cultivate solidarity with the persecuted church. Because once you do that, you are going to end up cultivating solidarity with lots of Christian populations that are being persecuted in every single part of the Islamic world, without exception. And then the other thing that you could do is get them into evangelism, because evangelism and teaching them apologetics and polemics gets them to recognize that not everybody shares the same worldview. So it's about discipleship through action, you know, rather than just doing word arguments. But yeah, I would suggest those three things to try and wake people up.
All right. Now the floor is yours, Senator.
Okay, so to my next point, I think Christians need to, if we're rejecting liberal secular humanism, we're embracing a thoroughly Christian identity. We're building a Christian political agenda out of that. We need to build a Christian culture within the church. Now, that means that Christians have to live a life that makes them different to the world around them, that alienates them from the world and the world from the church. Alienation is a good thing. It's not a bad thing. If we emphasize the things that make us different rather than the things that make us the same, it will actually help with evangelization. It will help by reinforcing a Christian identity. And the way that we do that is by celebrating our festivals, not the festivals of the world, living by our values, not the values of the world, and by leaning upon and borrowing from Christian traditions and Christian customs that work for us, and interlacing all of these things into our individual life, into the life of our families, into the life of our congregations, and into the life of our denominations, so that we can propose to the world and to the Muslim community a different identity. And we need, as part of that, to cultivate pride in our Christian identity, like cultivating an understanding of Christian history and all of the achievements of Christian peoples down through the world and their contribution to civilization, something that we've referenced a number of times. You know, every great, rather than saying that such and such is an American or such and such is British or that such and such is Spanish, anyone who we know as a Christian who achieved anything, claim them for the church. Just claim them as Christian. You know, and learn church history, and build your pride, your sense of identity, and your pride in your Christian culture. It is having that pride in our identity as Christians that is really important. You know, Christ said, the apostle said that you should boast of the cross. Well, that is at the very heart of a Christian culture. And if we're going to boast of anything, let us boast not of how many wars the United Kingdom has won, but let us instead boast of how many nations the church has converted. Let us boast of how many nations the church has transformed for the better. The fact that the church abolished the slave trade and fought against the slave trade and changed the economy of the world. You know, the church cultivated, particularly the Western church, cultivated Western Latin church and Protestant church cultivated science and advanced science, you know, and let us claim one another's heritage. You know, the fact that modern science grew up in the Latin, West and Protestant world is something that the Orthodox should be proud of and claim as their heritage as well. And every achievement by the Orthodox, we should claim as our own. You know, I often say to people in my own country, atheists in my own country, that an Ethiopian Orthodox Christian has more claim to St. Paul's than they do. Because what I'm trying to highlight is that the heritage of Christians is that the commonwealth of all Christians everywhere, you know, and that works in the reverse as well. So when Christians screw up, It's something that we should all recognize, like the witch trials, for instance, and that hysteria that erupted in the Latin West. And the Protestant world is something that all Christians can be embarrassed about and say, look, we messed up there. Do you know what I'm saying? And so it's about celebrating our festivals like Easter and Christmas, embodying a Christian culture in terms of fasting and foods that we eat, and pulling up into our lives customs that are Christian. We can scour the past, we can borrow from one another, and let's live out our Christian life as a culture without shame, without embarrassment, and without compromise. And that will actually not only serve as a bulwark against Islamization, but it will also make a stronger identity for everyone to adopt and enter into, including Muslims themselves.
Along the lines of what you were just saying, because Paul Copan does lots of presentations on this about the impact of Christianity around the world, and the data shows it everywhere, that wherever Christianity went, literacy shot up, respect for women's rights shot up, respect for oppressed minorities shot up, and so on. Wherever Christianity spread, good things followed. But somehow over the past few decades, what has happened, I don't know how things are in Europe, but in the U.S., you've been kind of taught to be ashamed of success. If you were somehow successful and so on, that's something to be ashamed of, because the only good thing you can be is an oppressed victim and so on. So if you are actually, you did a lot in this world, you need to be ashamed of it. And it's only the poor oppressed people who have anything to speak about. And if you can't speak about that, you need to keep your mouth shut and so on. And so Christians kind of lose sight of the impact that Christianity has had on the world. And then once Christians lose sight of that, as far as, just the things you were pointing out, ending slavery, the scientific revolution. I mean, everyone in the scientific revolution was a Christian of one variety or another, Catholic, Protestant, or some even heretical version. The point is they all believed in God and the Bible. And you have these kinds of things, and then people they lose sight of them, they forget them. And then what happens, then you have the new atheists, they come in and say, hey, religion only has a bad impact on the world. And the world would be much better if you got away from it, and everyone just becomes atheist. And then you get your scientific utopia, and then you get millions of people changing and identifying as atheists, and what happens, the entire world goes insane. But anyway, you are correct in terms of that's something I noticed, because I did a debate. This was years ago, but I did a debate at Columbia University, and it was with an atheist, and it was on the moral argument for God's existence. And then afterwards, I was hanging out with, I forget what it was, 7 or 8 atheists afterwards. It was me and 7 or 8 atheists, and we were hanging out afterwards, and they were asking me about why I believed in God, and I was running through various arguments, and then I ran through like my testimony with them, and then I said something, and I said, what do you think about that? And one of the atheists said, I don't care if it's true or not. I just care that it's bad. And that was like a shocking attitude for me. Like, I don't care if Christianity is true. I just care that it's bad. It's bad. Whether it's true or false, it's bad for the world. It is a bad thing for the world. And that was shocking to me, because I was actually thinking, like, wait a minute. I mean, I think Islam is bad for the world. I would still want to know if it's true or not. If Islam were true, I would want to know that. But anyway, so then I went down the line to every atheist who was there. I was like, do you agree with that? And I was shocked. They all agreed with that. They all agreed that religion being bad, Christianity being bad, is completely overshadows whether it's true or not. And so that was like shocking. Anyway, I was at a conference like a month or two later or whatever, and Paul Copan was there, and he's giving his presentation on the impact of Christianity on the world. And I said, you know what? There's this big conference right now, and people are giving arguments for the existence of God. I'm starting to think that the kind of stuff you're pointing out right now about the impact, the actual impact of Christianity on the world, which everyone's forgotten about, is actually more important than the arguments, because we're to the point where people don't care about the arguments because they think Christianity's been nothing but bad for the world, and they don't understand any of the stuff that you're pointing out right now.
And I think certainly recapturing our history as Christians is fundamental to our framing our life as Christians as an identity. But then living our life as Christians culturally, by, for instance, living out Christian spiritual disciplines, living out the Christian calendar, celebrating the great festivals of the church, participating in the great fasts of the church. Doing these things communally bears a witness. And if we're truly to have a Christian culture, then that means that we will once again be known as those people that love one another. And fundamentally, if you're going to get a Christian culture, it is that, see those Christians, see how they love one another, which was a frustration of the, I think it was the apostate, the apostate Caesar, who wanted to revive paganism at the latter end of the classical period. So as Christians, if we engender a Christian culture and live it out in terms of traditions, of customs, styles of dress, but also fundamentally on Christian ethics and values, and let that permeate every part of our life, it will shine like a light in the darkness. It will be a city on the hill, And so living out our faith as a culture is also going to be speaking to lots of Muslims, because lots of Muslims understand their faith only as a culture. They don't know the Qur'an. They don't know the hadiths. They just know Ramadan. They just know, certain styles of dress. For them, it's a culture. And so if we want them to become Christian, as well as the atheists who are screaming out for a culture and the conservatives who want a culture of their own, if we live out a culture, then that will help in all of our evangelism, as well as strengthening our identity as Christians. So it's about living your faith out as culturally as possible, in every possible way.
You got an objection here in a second. Would love to see a response to Bobby's Perspective's video about the study showing that Christianity is decreasing and Islam is increasing. What study?
What study? Pew Research shows that Christianity continues to grow at the same rate as the birth rates globally.
Yeah, and
so what study is he talking about?
Yeah, as far as Islam increasing, it's birth rates. The same Pew Research study. It's high birth rates in Muslim world. So what are you saying? And by the way, we know why Islam has that effect. It turns women into baby making machines. That's why. So if you want to argue that a religion turning women into baby making machines and giving them few opportunities and starting them off having children as when they're still young and so on, that means that a religion is true, I'd love to see the evidence.
He must be talking about studies of the collapse of Christianity in Western Europe, which it is. Like in the UK, within my lifetime, I expect to see those identifying as Christian drop below 20%. Because the average age of a Christian in the UK is 51. The average age of everybody else is 42. And the average age of a Muslim in the UK is 27. Now, that in itself is a problem, which will be my next point when you're ready to move on.
Yep. Says Christians unite and bring back the Crusades. Depends on what you mean. I'm from Southwest. What would you say to churches that don't see concern? Thanks to Bob, AP, and D. Wood. From the Southwest, what would you say to churches? I'm not sure what you mean here. Yeah, go ahead.
If it was Christians in the Southwest of America, I would seek to cultivate within them greater solidarity with churches and the Christians in other parts of the world. If it's Christians in the Southwest of England, I would say go and look at Tim Dieppe's work, and you'll see why Islamization is a concern. The guy has done a scholarly, masterful piece talking about Islamization. You had him on your channel to talk about it. But the thing with Tim Dieppe, and I've said this to him in person, is that he doesn't focus enough on the solutions. He highlights the problem brilliantly, but he doesn't really focus enough on the solutions. And I want to fill that space of discussing solutions.
And here you have your objection. And I think I'm done reading Snudgewick's comments right now. Just a really nasty attitude and condescending, and then not having really a basis for it. But Snudgewick here says, Jesus drove out the animals being sold for sacrifice. Get your doctrine right, Bobby. Let me just...
Well, Snudgewick...
No, I
just needs to read the scripture carefully.
Yeah, no, I've got it right here.
I've got it right here.
I've got it right here, Bob. I've got it right here. Here we go.
All right.
So this is John chapter 2, verse 13. So Snudgewick, this is why I'm not reading your comments anymore. This is, if you wanted to say you're interpreting this in a certain way, then that would be one thing. I agree, you can interpret these things in the way you interpret them, but just to give an interpretation that isn't solid, given what the text actually says, and then to just have this condescending attitude, not interested in anymore. Anyway, the Passover of the Jews was at hand, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. In the temple, he found those who were selling oxen and sheep and pigeons, and the money changers sitting there. And making a whip of cords, he drove them all out of the temple with the sheep and oxen. Did you catch that? In the temple, he found those, so he's talking about people and animals. In the temple, he found those who were selling oxen and sheep and pigeons, and the money changers sitting there. And making a whip of cords, he drove them all out of the temple with the sheep and oxen. And he poured out the coins of the money changers and overturned the tables. And he told those who sold the pigeons, take these things away. Do not make my Father's house a house of trade. So he makes a whip and then drives them all, people and animals, out of the temple. So keep in mind, it doesn't say he's like lashing people in their faces. So you can interpret it as he didn't harm anyone or something like that, or didn't hit anyone with it or something like that. But just this blanket way of, nope, he drove out the animals. It was only the animals. It was just the animals being sold for sacrifice. Just the animals. Said he drove them all out of the temple. What are you even talking about? You're not even reading it correctly.
Yeah.
So again,
exactly.
you can read it that way. You can. Just the fact that you're just like condescending and, haha, you idiot, why don't you read it correctly? And you're not even reading it correctly. This is bad, Snudgewick. And if that's what you have to do to defend your position, shame on you. Shame on you, dare I say. All right, go ahead, Bob.
Should I continue with my presentation, or do you want to do it? Yeah.
What's that? Wait. Oh, go ahead. Oh, by the way, I do have an appointment that I have to be at in 20 minutes. So we have a couple of what's that?
Nothing. Continue.
So we have a couple of options. One, how many more points do you have? Because I can tell my wife right now to reschedule it, or I could get up, run to it real quick, and come back. It's only a 5 minute check thing.
Or we could do a part 2.
Or we could do a part 2. Yeah. So
shall we do a part 2?
That's up to you.
And then you can go to your appointment.
Okay, that works.
Yeah.
David is
so on that devastating note for Snudgewick, God bless. I'll just add in. I'll just chime in on that, because there is this interpretation that Jesus didn't hurt anyone in this passage. I find that hard to believe. The reason why I find that hard to believe is because imagine, these Jewish traders who were desecrating the temple. They believed that they had every right to be there. And what is the Jewish thing to do if someone pushes you?
Push back.
Push back. So if they thought that they had the right to be there by precedent, and the Jewish attitude is, eye for an eye, blow for blow, tooth for tooth kind of thing. And then Jesus comes along and he tries to drive them all out. I don't think that they just went, oh, yeah, okay, we'll go. I just don't see that happening.
I'll just get up and leave.
Yeah, I don't
He's
think
saying
that
leave.
happens.
He's saying leave. He's saying leave. Let's all leave. Here's this guy. He says leave.
Yeah, I just don't think that it's going to happen. And I think that Christians want to read more into granted that the text doesn't say that there was a fight. It just says he drove them out. But if you can imagine how you drive animals forward, how do you drive, if you drive cattle and other creatures forward, we've all seen it. You give them a beat, if you want them to move in a certain direction. Obviously, you're not trying to harm them. And so if we're going to understand Christ's words, it would seem to him, if we're going to understand the gospel, it would seem to suggest that Christ did land blows, even if we might allow that these blows were not like deadly or hospitalizing people. And so I just don't think that people can get away with interpreting that text that there wasn't a fight. And if people want to, then I'd be open to their interpretation. But it's certainly not just the animals. Yeah, sorry, Snudgewick.
Yeah, I just got annoyed with Snudgewick. Like every comment was turning into like this condescending insult. Anyway, I got annoyed and just clicked block because I didn't feel like dealing with it anymore.
Right. Yeah. Poor Snudgewick. Snudgewick, write to me and we'll talk.
Yeah, Snudgewick, if you want to say, hey, you have the correct interpretation, that's fine. But to just be this like condescending jerk, I mean, go somewhere else. We're trying to have a good conversation about Christianity and just come with this horrible attitude problem. All right, so we're going to have a part 2. We're going to have a part 2, ladies and gentlemen. Let's go ahead and I have to leave in about 5 or 6 minutes, so just grab as many of these super chats as we can before then. And Rory, quit complaining we didn't get to your thing, man. I didn't get through all of them yet. We didn't get through all of them yet. Like, well, you didn't get to mine. You didn't get to mine. Right.
I'm just an annoying guest that doesn't like these super chats. So it's blame me, yep. not David.
I don't like super chats.
Let's see. Jesus picked on the switch, but does that rule out everything else he did? What about the example he set by the way he received torture and abuse, and finally the execution on the cross? Yeah, guys, you have multiple things here. You have one: Jesus is here to die on the cross. That does not tell you that you are never allowed to defend yourself because Jesus willingly accepted that. That does not tell you that everything is like that. That everything in the world is like that. So yeah, don't misapply scripture. Jesus willingly died. Therefore, if someone is brutally murdering my child, I have to just sit there and watch because Jesus willingly died. Therefore, I should willingly let my child die. That's sort of extremely sloppy reasoning.
Exegesis. Yeah. And just to think about, what does love demand? It's not just love of your enemies. It's love of your family. It's love of your brothers and sisters. You've got to have all of these loves. And that's why the tradition develops this understanding of the ordoramus of love, the order of love, which J.D. Vance kind of misused in an interview where he sort of misapplied it. But the order of love requires that if someone is going to, for instance, kill your child, that you because of your love for your child, you defend them from the person going to kill them. And if that means you use force, then you do it. You do it not because you hate the person that's trying to kill your child, but because you love your child.
Yeah, and I just have to say, it's weird because people are looking, where did Jesus say you could defend your child from an armed robber? It's like, I don't think that was in question. Like, why would he even be... If that's just taken for granted, like if that's like common sense, if someone's attacking my child, I defend my child, then, he didn't say it. Okay. I don't think it was an issue that would have been disputed.
It's also the worst use of it's the worst understanding of sola scriptura. It's the idea that the Bible is alone, and therefore we can only do what the Bible says literally. But the problem with that is it doesn't account for the fact that most of the Bible is stories, it's narrative. And from that narrative emerges doctrines, and from those doctrines emerge values, and from those values are your actions decided. So just sort of isolating one part of the narrative as if somehow that gives you a comprehensive worldview is actually to misunderstand how to handle scripture. Mm-hmm. You got to work from the whole story.
Correct. Hello, David, Bob, and AP. Thank you for all the work you're putting in. It's your guys' work and people like Sam, Godlogic, etc. that has brought me back to Christ as the church did push me away. God bless you all.
Wonderful.
Welcome to the family, bro.
Really enriching discussion and teaching. Deus Vult.
Deus Vult.
I'd be more ecumenical if I weren't so anathema. Protestants tend to recognize other denominations as Christian, whereas Catholics and Orthodox often don't return the favor, even calling me demonic. Well, we'd have to see what they're calling you demonic about because we might, maybe.
Well, also, I've met at Speaker's Corner. I just want to point this out. At Speaker's Corner, there is a real ecumenical missionary effort going on at Speaker's Corner. Orthodox, Roman Catholics, and Protestants are all working together to evangelize Muslims at Speaker's Corner. So it can be done. We are doing it. So if we can do it, none of you have an excuse.
Indeed, indeed. It can be done, ladies and gentlemen. It can be done. Whatever happened to that skit that was filmed at last year's Seek and Share Truth Conference? We need answers. Yeah. So Thaddeus recorded that, and he had the footage, but there was apparently some corruption on his drive, so he sent that out for data recovery. So we'll see how that goes. How does Snudgwick interpret Matthew 24, 43 to 44? That is interesting. That's the passage about if someone breaks in. Let's see, but know this, that if the master of the house had known in what part of the night the thief was coming, he would have stayed awake and would not have let his house be broken into. Therefore, you also must be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour you do not expect. So there, Jesus is talking about, hey, you need to be watching for when the Son of Man comes. But he takes as a principle that if you know when a thief is going to break in, then you would stay up and not let the thief break in. So
that's a secondary interpretation, but yes.
Yeah. So, the point is, how would you be stopping a thief? In other words, he takes it as a principle. Of course, if someone's breaking into your house and you know about it, you would make sure he doesn't break into your house. Well, how are you going to stop him if you were like Snudgwick or something?
Well, I would argue this. I would argue it this way. Christ says, "Love your neighbor as you love yourself," right? Which means that I don't want my house to be broken into, so I want to create a world in which my neighbor's house is not broken into. If I am justified in trying to create a world in which my neighbor's house is not broken into, then I am justified in defending my own house from being broken into, because Christ starts the whole argument from love thy neighbor as you love thyself.
Mm-hmm. Bob, I'm moving to the UK soon. What Christians, people, places can I connect with? I only know atheists over there. Love you guys. God bless you all.
Get in touch with me. I'll try and connect you.
Bob will help you out. Bob's got the answer.
If I can.
What do we have? Russian church is fake. Patriarch is KGB agent. There you have it, AP.
Very rude.
Nonsense.
Yeah.
Very rude and ignorant.
Connect those verses in Matthew back to Exodus 22 and 20. Yeah, Exodus passage. Exodus is about a thief and so on. Soft soap Christianity is bad, but isn't there the danger of veering into positive Christianity when Christians focus too much on not being wimpy? So yeah, the concern here, Bob, is, and this is my concern, that as Christians are pushed too far in one direction, they're going to snap out of it, but then go too far in the other direction, and we will subjugate the entire world in the name of Christ. That sort of thing.
Yeah, and obviously, it's about making sure that we embody Christ's love, and Christ's love is not about imposing ourselves on others in ways that are not justified. Mm-hmm. It's also, I think that the real danger for Christians is that they fall into ultra-nationalism, or that they double down on classical liberalism, that they snap out of wimpy Christianity, but then put all their chips on liberal secular humanism in the classical Jordan Peterson form, and end up failing because Jordan Peterson's conservative classical liberalism it is not effective to the job. Or the alternative is they fall into an ultra kind of nationalism, like certain kinds of Christianity within Orthodoxy are, and end up serving the idol of a nation state rather than using the nation state to serve Christ. And that's a danger in America as well that I see in America, amongst Protestants.
Always have to say something bad about Orthodox.
Mm-hmm.
I love the Orthodox Church. Yeah. It's brilliant.
Conrad says, hey, Bob, just figured out if I press this button, it takes my money. Isn't that cool? That is cool. Word on Box says, I am fangirling Bob from Speaker's Corner. Is the greatest of all. He's the GOAT. That's true.
What does GOAT mean? Why do people keep calling me GOAT?
Greatest of all time.
Oh, right.
It stands for greatest of all time.
No. I actually thought people were calling me an animal.
No. They normally put it in all caps if they're talking about greatest of all time.
Right.
Christian women should reclaim clothing modesty for no reason other than to refocus the word of God by mouth instead of the influence of our bodies.
Agreed. Christian modesty is Christian culture.
We need a collab between the Where is your Caleb guy and Trump. Where is your Caleb dog, Trump? They're eating the dogs. They're eating the dogs. Rory says, how does Snudgewick explain Matthew 12? Yeah, you brought this up. And the link.
We've done that one.
Yeah, we checked that out. Yeah. I think that's when Rory thought I was skipping his super chats when I wasn't. I just hadn't gotten them yet. Sounds like Christians can learn from Israelis, but an alarming number of Christians seem to struggle with seeing Jews as humans too. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there is this emergent, and it's connected to the rise of nationalism, but there is this emergent nationalism, anti-Semitism, emergent property within certain Christian circles. And, both of these things need to be reviled. If the Jews control, and it's full of conspiracy theory, but and it's worthy of its own video entirely. But if the Jews control the world, they're doing a really shit job. They're doing a really rubbish job if they control the world. Because, considering the flack that they get.
It's true. Isn't it also, I don't know, I feel like much of this trend here that we are talking about, which I guess you could say is kind of taking certain extremes into the wrong direction and either becoming too weak and completely soft and all that, or becoming completely insane. Don't you think that much of that whole anti-Jewish thing is rather just online? I mean, I don't think that there is much of it actually, in the real churches in real life.
I agree.
The concern is that it will spread more, right? If it's online and it's got the ideas, then you'll get more and more people, and if it spreads enough, then you do get it in the churches.
I also feel like that online, like many of the people who are online and who, explicitly who identify as Christian, who put Christian symbolism on, and who then hate on other people. I don't know. I'm kind of convinced that many of those people are not even real people, or that they are paid, or they are bots from different countries, or so. I don't know.
There can be. It's probably a mixture. How do we hold on to fellowship with Christians who are constantly bashing Israel? Well, you don't need to. You could be buddies with better Christians if they just sit around all day whining about things you don't want them to.
And also, it's about. It's also about remembering that Israel is not what defines you as a Christian. Your views on Israel don't define you as a Christian. It is your views on Christ that define you as a Christian. And all Christians agree about that. And I think also this whole binary debate between, are you for Israel or are you against Israel, kind of misses the point. We should be for the church. And the church includes many Jews. There are many Messianic Jews who are part of the church, and we should be for the church in Israel, and we should be for the church outside of Israel. And in terms of Israel's fight with Islamists, then obviously, for reasons that I don't have time to explain, we should support Israel over the Islamists, And then any issues that we might have with Israel, because I do have issues with Israel, we should offer those as people who are on their side, but not uncritically.
Yo, AP, I want to join Orthodox Church. The only problem is the only church that's close is Russian, and everything seems to be done in Russian. What should I do? God bless. Oh, hi, Bob and D-Wood. Yeah, get a big bottle of vodka and roll with it from there.
I mean, I would recommend still going to it and checking it out. Depends on what kind of Russian church you're talking about, but I would recommend still checking it out. Maybe, I don't know, talking to a priest, talking to the congregation, figuring it out. Maybe they have something else to say about that. Maybe there are different options.
Yeah, and when you go in there, they're going to say, when you go in there, they're going to show you how you can sign up to go fight Ukraine. Let's see. Bob thought me. Gratitude. I am great. I am forever grateful. Hey, AP disappeared. Look, see, as soon as we said one word about Russian Orthodoxy, flipped out. Patriotic
his power's gone. His power's gone again.
AP running. AP running. As soon as anyone says Russian Orthodox. Weekend. All right, guys. We've got I should have taken off like 5 minutes ago, but wanted to get.
If you need to go.
Oh, well, there's only a couple more, so I can read them real quick. Weak men create hard times create strong men create good times create weak men. That is the pattern sort of was talking about earlier.
Stick Christian in front of men on all of that, and you get it right.
Are the fruits of the Spirit exclusive evidence of the Holy Spirit? What do we make of non-believers embodying some of these virtues? Don't have much time to go into this, but no, other people are created in the image of God, and saying that, this is the fruit of the Holy Spirit doesn't mean that someone can't act in similar ways.
Also, the fruit, for it to be a fruit of the Spirit, it needs to be directed to God as end. It's not saying that these behavioral traits can't be held by other people, because, as David said, they're made in the image of God. But what makes them a fruit of the Spirit is that in the life of the Christian, they are directed to God as end, whereas in other people, it's directed to some other end. And that's what makes it a fruit of the Spirit.
Here's an important point. Adam says, I'm pretty sure Jesus is the same God as the one in the Old Testament, so Jesus is a pacifist. I think not. Oh, hi, Bob.
Hi, Adam.
Actually, a good point there. And last one here. Bob, does it bother you that Jordan Peterson has converted more people to Christianity than you ever will? Just asking questions.
No, I am glad that God has used Jordan Peterson, and I celebrate every conversion. And actually, I've worked with a lot of those people who've converted. And just a quick call out, if Jordan Peterson wants to talk to me, I'd love to talk to him about stuff.
And just a quick call out, we'd love for Jordan Peterson to talk to Bob here. And finally, we have the ultimate slap in the face to AP.
Oh, no.
Says Ukrainian Nazis are prosecuting Orthodox Christians in Ukraine. Please research real news. AP
real news. You mean real news, like stuff that you find from Russian propaganda sources or from dummies on Twitter?
Don't get me. I mean, the thing is that there are persecutions of Russian Orthodox by Ukraine, but none of that action. But it doesn't justify a full-scale invasion, because the number of Ukrainian Orthodox who are not persecuting Russian Orthodox that are being killed now, it doesn't scale up. You're killing more innocent Orthodox Ukrainians who have never persecuted Russian Orthodox Christians.
The funny thing is that the Ukrainian side is full of Ukrainian Orthodox Christians. There are Russian Orthodox Christians that are inside Ukraine, and there has been a lot of tension between Ukraine and Russia over territorial and ethnic issues. And definitely, Ukraine did take certain measures and also did engage in oppressive behavior toward certain people who are associated of or accused of being, tools or elements of the Russian government, because the Russian government is simply evil. But so has the other side done the same thing in Russia. This doesn't mean that there are Ukrainian Nazis oppressing Orthodox Christians. This is not about Christianity in this conflict. It is about the conflict between these two national or ethnic groups.
And the failure of the Russian state to create a sphere of influence that anyone wanted to belong to. If the Kremlin had spent more time tackling corruption inside the Russian Federation and building a Russia that worked, you might have found that Poland and Ukraine wanted to be more aligned to Russia than to the West.
But nobody wants to be under the influence of Russia. Nobody wants it. Yeah. Nobody likes it.
And so you heard it here, folks. I have to go out because I'm supposed to be at an appointment right now. But Russia poisons everything, and AP says the Orthodox Church is too weak to stop it. So
I'm pretty sure that was a misquote. Daif.
All right, guys. Yeah. Sorry, everyone. I have to cut this short, but I do have an appointment I have to get to. And so
we'll do part 2 another time.
We're gonna have a part 2 whenever Bob wants to join us again, probably sometime next week or something like that if he's free. And we will catch you all then. Catch everyone later.